For our final session before lunch, we're in for a real treat, and I have the pleasure of introducing and interviewing the 4th Viscount Rothermere, the chairman of DMGT, and a direct relation of Lord Northcliffe, who first published the Daily Mail in 1896. It may well be in the library here somewhere. He became chairman of DMGT at the age of 29, following the death of his father, and today he shapes and guides an international business which employs more than 12,000 people in over 40 countries. It's a publicly listed operation, and in its most recent financial year made an operating profit of more than 300 million. Newspapers are just one part of the business, but they're a successful and important part with the Daily Mail, the Mail Online, and the Mail on Sunday. And it's newspapers and news brands that we're here to discuss today. Jonathan hasn't just worked in the Mail family. His newspaper career has included stints at the International Herald Tribune and the Mirror Group, as well as his own regional newspapers. So he has a very rich breadth of experience, as well as running the successful brands that we're all familiar with. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to introduce Lord Rothermere. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You've been chairman of DMGT for 15 years now, and I wanted to start by asking you, what's the biggest change that you've seen during that period?
The biggest change? Well, I think the biggest financial effect on the newspaper industry has been the migration of classified advertising out of most of the newspapers into the internet. So that's had very significant financial repercussions, particularly for the local news media. I think, obviously, the birth of the internet goes without saying, but I think more importantly, recently, we've seen the growth of mobile and the tablet, and I think that's another sea change for our industry.
And when you look at those changes and you look at your business, how have you responded as a business to those changes? What's been the impact in the way in which you operate and think about things?
Well, I think that I'm very fortunate, come from the family that founded the industry, and we've always believed in two elements of our company, which is, firstly, we believe in editorial and creativity, and that's a sort of major theme in our organisation. And secondly, because of our family are entrepreneurs, we always sympathise and empathise with entrepreneurial spirit. So that's allowed us to diversify our business internationally. But it's also brought into the newspaper industry a greater sense of innovation. And in the last 15 years, we've launched the Metro and Mail Online, as various other businesses, not just in the consumer media space. And I think that sense of innovation is growing within the organisation, and it's something I feel very passionately about.
Could you talk a little bit about the strategy for the brand, in the sense of what's the difference between Mail Online and the Mail as a brand, and then where does Mail Plus fit in? How do those three relate to one another?
Well, I think I don't think that we've been hugely clever about this. I think what we've done is sort of stuck to our knitting and some core beliefs. And our core beliefs are around we shouldn't try and stop people from seeing the Mail, reading the Mail. They can do it on whatever format they like. So we, put a lot of emphasis into Mail Online, put a lot of good journalists onto it, Martin Clark, and that's paid dividends for us. And as a result, we've learnt a whole set of new skills, and it's been and now that's what we're trying to do with Mail Plus, but we're positioning that slightly differently. For us, it's a more premium environment, and we've got Paul Field running the Mail Plus thing. We're putting a lot of effort into that. I mean, those guys are working extremely hard, sort of 50-hour days, and we're going to try and push that as a separate medium. So I think that what we have to understand about the digital environment is that content changes according to the medium that people are using. So a smartphone is a different experience from a tablet, which is a different experience to the computer. I mean, and it's iterative. You have to learn iteratively, and that's really important, that you have no hard and fast prejudices, and because the public will lead you where they want to go. So, for example, tablet we thought was going to be a working device. Well, actually, most people use the tablet at home. So that's something that we have to learn.
Yeah. And when you watch the audience as well, I mean, the audience for Mail Online is massive.
Yeah.
How does that relate to the audience for the Mail itself and their characteristics? Do they feel like a different group of people?
Well, they are a surprisingly different group of people, actually. The Mail Online is a much younger audience, and of course it's a much more international audience. And a choice of stories is slightly different as well. And they expect things to be very immediate. So, for example, Twitter, who's gone, but Twitter is a major form of primary source material for us. And I think the guys at Mail Online try and turn around news from Twitter within about 3 minutes. They're trying to do it sooner than that. So the timeliness of news is becoming much more important, and journalists are having to learn a lot more different skills in understanding that, and they are.
At the moment, the Mail Online is free to access, and different groups have different policies for charging and paywalls. Do you have a sense of for how long you can continue allowing it to be free, or whether that's something that will inevitably come to an end?
Well, I think Mail Plus is not, it will not be free at this stage. We're trying to make it a premium. That may not work, we don't know, but that's what we're trying to do at the moment. Mail Online for the foreseeable future will be free because we're not competing against other newspapers. We see that there's a global opportunity here, and we want to carry on growing. We would ideally like to double our size and try and compete with the likes of Yahoo News on a global space. So I think that's going to be very difficult to do that just using by charging. However, in due course, I think that we will start experimenting with a sort of freemium type model, but I believe that we'll probably have to invest in premium content to do that rather than carry on.
Right. Are there active plans for that at the moment, or is that something that's further
I think we're actively thinking about it.
When you talk about your global reach and also the relationship with Twitter, I mean, clearly Twitter's not the only organisation. There's Google and Facebook and all of these very big new media organisations that have emerged recently. Are they competitive or complementary or a bit of both? What's your attitude towards them as partners and potential partners?
I think they're frenemies, aren't they? I mean, that's that awful word, but it's so true, unfortunately. Yes, they're going to compete for advertising dollars. That's undoubtedly the truth. But they are a huge source of traffic for us. We're the most shared site on Facebook in the UK and growing to become the same in the US. So they're huge marketing tools for us. Twitter could be a big marketing tool if we used it more effectively. I don't think we do that yet. But as a primary source material, we are finding it as one of the major sources of news stories. So I think we're codependent.
Yeah. You talked about a lot of advertising disappearing from print and going to the web, but clearly newspapers in their paper form continue to be very important. What is it in your view, and having lived with this sort of from the day you were born, what is it that distinguishes newspapers, do you believe, from other media, from a reader's point of view and also from an advertiser's point of view?
What distinguishes newspapers from other media? Well, I think we know that people have a relationship with newspapers which is, very unusual. When I was learning the trade, they used to say that people change their partners and their banks more often than they change their newspapers, and back then that was quite rare. These days it's more common. But so newspapers have a very long relationship with, and I think the biggest conundrum for me, 10 years ago, was that we were seeing that there was a decline in young people reading newspapers, and it wasn't anything to do with the internet. It was just a sort of general apathy, or they felt that newspapers didn't speak to them, or they were getting their news from the television or so forth. And I think the internet, actually, and the proliferation of news as content on the internet has meant that young people are more likely to engage with our newspapers. So it's actually given us access to an entirely new generation that if it hadn't happened, we probably wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah. Do you think there's a possibility that they will migrate from the internet into the world of print, or are we moving now into a new era in terms of their relationship with the content that you produce?
I'd love to think that they would migrate into traditional newspaper readers, and some will. But I think that that's not a philosophy I think I would bank on. I think they're going to stay digital, and I think that our existing readers, many will move towards the iPad and to. So I think that I think we'll continue to see a migration towards digital.
So there's a focus on screens, and for many years people have talked about this is going to be the year of mobile, and this may be the year of mobile, but something else has also emerged, which of course is the tablet, and you're capitalising on that. When you look, and clearly you take a long-term view, when you look at the significance of those screens, what do you think their impact will be on your business, and are you able to distinguish between the importance of the mobile and the tablet?
Well, the mobile comes in different formats, doesn't it? I mean, you've got the iPad, which is a richer environment, and the smartphones, which again are different. So we have to tailor our content very acutely to what the readers want. I think that one of the things that we're seeing is, and I think it's actually going to happen with HTML5 is that advertising is going to get richer. There's going to be more video, so there's going to be a greater opportunity for brand building using the internet, which to date actually hasn't been great on the internet, or on any digital device. So I think that's going to be a big sea change and a big opportunity for us.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. So the only brands, someone was saying to me the other day, that have been built on digital brands themselves.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's an opportunity other people haven't yet taken.
And yet we have a number of digital-only brands, and they are increasingly spending their money off above the line. Yeah, to try and, like for example, Zoopla.
Yeah.
So they can't rely entirely on the internet as an advertising medium themselves.
Absolutely. Jonathan has kindly agreed to take some questions from the floor. So now is the time that we can throw it open. I've got some more questions that I'm quite keen to ask. But if there are people with burning questions, please raise your hand.
Hi there, Catherine Rushton from the Telegraph. You said that you were, I think the expression was, actively thinking about some kind of freemium strategy. Could you just expand on that a bit and the kind of things you're weighing up and when that might be likely to happen?
Well, I can't put a time frame on it. I think that, as I say, we've launched Mail Plus, and we're having a look-see how that develops. And at the moment, we've got no hard and fast plans to do anything on Mail Online. But we are starting to look at premium content and try and understand how we might find a mechanism for charging for that. But it's really early days.
Again, in the background.
Hello, Dylan Wimpew from News International. We're all sort of looking at different models and different innovation. Have you seen anything in your competitors or in the market that you think, as an entrepreneur, you wish you'd thought of first?
Oh, there's lots of things in the internet world that I'd like to have thought of first. I think in the UK newspaper environment, I think that The Guardian has been outstanding, and the Financial Times has been very good as well. The Financial Times, in many ways, led the market. Were the first to move behind the paywall, first to embrace HTML5. So I think that there are some, and I think that we must, as an industry, look and take the best ideas from wherever we find them. So I'd have to say those two. And what we saw today was pretty interesting. I was taking notes about that. So I think I do see innovation in the industry, and it's impressive.
When you look at the history of the Mail and the amount of innovation that's taking place now, can you think of any other time when there has been this level of change?
Well, our industry has always fluctuated, but I think the level of change today is pretty extreme, yeah. And it's growing. The speed of change is happening faster and faster.
So when you look ahead at the next 10 years, do you imagine that the change that we see in the next 10 years will be significantly greater than the change we've seen in the past 10?
Yeah, I do. I think that one of the big unknowns, as I said, the rich media as the download times reduce, as processing power increases, I think you'll start seeing more and more rich media. But I think you'll also start seeing much more presumptive advertising and content, for that matter. That's sort of Web 3.0. So it's the utilization of big data or unlimited data processing and together with a lot of personal information and being able to really target individuals with a prescient message, whether that's advertising or news. And I think companies that invest in that or understand that are going to get a head start. And I think that the big IT companies in America, Google and Yahoo, really understand that and getting on. But
Is that an opportunity for newspaper groups?
I think so, because newspaper, if you have a big site, I think this is the tension between paid for and free, you see. But if you have a big site and you have a lot of people on your site and they're loyal, you can start building an understanding of their profile. And as you understand their profile better and better, so that you can get ahead with trying to offer advertisers a much more targeted segment, which is going to be more likely to respond.
There was also a conversation earlier, which I don't think you could be here for, about the importance of context and culture.
Yeah.
I mean, do you believe that advertising within a context makes a difference when you move into that new world, which is all about data?
I totally think so. I mean, I'm on Facebook. The only ads I ever see on Facebook are ads about how I can tone my abs. So I don't, and I don't really click on them very often. But you know, I do resend them to Guy though. So no, I think context is absolutely vital, particularly for brand building. But I think that what's exciting about presumptive advertising is you can build in the presumption with the context and sort of find that holy grail, and that's interesting to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's lots more questions over here. Just take this one and then that one.
Rob Kinsley, Independent News and Media. Does it worry you that the print dollars and the digital cents won't replace the print dollars? And what are you doing about that?
Okay, so I think if we were looking at a UK environment in entirety, I mean, it is definitely a worry. But if we were looking at just a UK environment, I think we would be absolutely forced down the road of charging for content, because there'd be no other way of replacing our total revenue. 60% of our revenues do come from cover price on the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. So it is still a very important thing for us. So we would be, but I think that the opportunity of reaching an English-speaking audience globally with a pretty fixed cost base, it's not going to grow in line with the number of audience, means that there is potentially a much larger ad cake out there. And if you keep your fixed cost base quite tight and you start growing your traffic and you'll get your advertising in, eventually you start becoming quite profitable quite quickly. Whereas with newspapers, you grow your audience, you have a higher marginal cost. So it's a different kind of business model. That's the game we're trying to play at the moment. If we don't get to the right size, then that'll be the issue, and we'll have to start becoming more and more focused on charging for content. It's interesting to note, I don't know, for many of you must have seen that US newspapers reported a growth in revenues mainly driven by subscription revenues recently. Most of those are obviously local newspapers, and I think that is quite it's an appropriate tactic for them. And what they're doing is they're bundling iPads and their normal internet traffic, and saying if you want to access this, you have to go behind a paywall, and that's what's working for them.
Do you think, what are the main differences between our market and the US market in terms of running newspapers?
Well, firstly, a lot of these newspapers work in a sort of monopolistic situation in their local town, so they're any source of information there. They have a brand built, and they have great subscription setups, so they're able to tag on the internet with a subscription of the newspaper in a tighter format. So that's worked for them. Whereas in our market, we're much more competitive. But I do think that for many local newspapers, it could be an answer.
Do you think as an industry we're learning more from them or are they learning from us?
It's interesting. I think it's some. I mean, it's both. Yeah.
Thanks, Paul Bainsford, the IPA. Very interested to hear how you broke into America. You've got a fantastically successful product there. It's a dream of most marketeers to crack that market. Yet you've done it with a British brand. Can you give us some insights as to how that was achieved?
Well, firstly, I think when we started Mail Online, we started seeing a lot of traffic from the US, and we didn't know how to monetize it, and it was a bit irritating. So I think, to be honest with you, at the beginning, we sort of didn't really want it. And then And then being, unashamedly opportunistic, as it's continued to grow, I remember reading an interview with Rushbridge, and he was talking about making the Guardian a global newspaper, and I thought, well, actually, that's a pretty cool idea. So I started talking to Paul and co and saying, well, why don't we start, why don't we follow the traffic? Why don't we put some people into California, that's into LA, and then they came back, and then that worked, and then they said, well, we really want to be in New York. That's the centre. That's the place to be for news journalism. So they started building a team in the US, in New York, and it's just continued to grow. We sort of followed our success, if you like. It's really that simple. Try things, and if something works, back it, and that's what we've done. I think that it's easy it would be nice to take the credit myself, but I have to say that actually the success of Mail Online is built on the back of a huge amount of hard work and talent from Martin Clark and our other journalists.
Thank you. Greg.
Paul's question actually helped mine because it was a global question as well. I was very encouraged to hear that a UK news brand is talking about global domination. It's very refreshing to hear. And on that basis, I mean, do you see the competitor as someone like The Guardian, who's also done a brilliant job globally, or the New York Times, or do you see it coming from something like the Huffington Post or indeed BuzzFeed?
I think our competition is going to come from lots of different locations, including the likes of Twitter and competitors that we haven't even been invented yet. And so I worry less about what my competitors are doing and more about what we're doing to continue to be relevant to our readers and grow our traffic. And if our competitors do something, well, then I think we need to learn from it and try and emulate it. So I think that's my view of the competitive set. But the competition is going to continue to grow, in fact. And I think that one of the challenges is that it's a global. I'm more worried about the Huffington Post, for example. Global competitors are going to become, a bigger threat to us than domestic competitors for an international market.
You mentioned a couple of other newspaper groups and also the level of change that's taking place at the moment. And you also used the word frenemies earlier to describe the relationship with some of the newer media companies. Do you feel now that the levels of competition between newspaper groups are becoming a bit more cloudy and that there are areas where you can learn from each other and collaborate together?
Well, that is interesting. Well, I'd quite like to start off by getting my newspapers within my own company to collaborate. So Marcus over there has been given that unenviable task. I think that would be nice, and and perhaps it will happen. But at the moment, I think we're collaborating by just sharing ideas with each other, or stealing ideas from each other. But in time, who knows? Yeah.
Any more questions from the floor? There's one over there and then one in the middle there.
What's the definition of premium content that Mail Online readers would be able to pay for, be prepared to pay for? And also, how big is big enough for total scale for Mail Online to not have to charge for any content?
Good questions. Well, I'd have to say that I don't have the answer to either of them. I think the first is, but it's a fatuous answer, but premium content will be what people pay for, and you'll find out pretty quickly what they'll pay for. I mean, it could be that Mail Plus is premium content, which is just a basic repackaging of the paper. It could be that we might have to go into the rights business, and buy some sports rights, etc. It could be good journalism. It could be, I don't know yet. I mean, it's a task in hand, and it's a big subject, and I would be lying if I said I had a handle on it, or our journalists do. Second question was how big. There is no limit to how big we'd like to get. I think we'll carry on trying to grow, and when we stop growing, then we'll try and monetize our site as much as we can.
It's interesting talking about rights, though, it's a very good example of how the boundaries are really blurring between the different media.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah.
And I think that, my daughter's here today, actually, which is nice to see her come and support her dad. But I watch her consumption habits quite a lot, and kids don't really watch TV anymore. if they do watch TV, they tend to watch it on a computer or an iPad, and they tend to watch the shows they like. And they also are very attuned to seeing videos on news sites. So they like watching videos. So the growth of video for our organisation is really going to be seminal. And that's a challenge for us, because obviously we're not great at new video content, so we have to learn that talent. But it gives us the opportunity of competing with television channels in the long run.
When you say you have to learn that talent, are you bringing new people in to help develop that side of the business, or retraining the people that you've got?
A bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, it's a bit of both. But we can't. We've got great journalists who have great news sense, and so taking that skill and putting it together with people who really understand video content has got to be a good thing. But I think a lot of it's going to be led by, as we saw, the Twitter, that video of someone filming the helicopter crash, or the videos of the bombings in Boston. That will come up on the website very quickly. So we have to be magpies about video content as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One final question from the audience, and then I've got a question.
Hi, I'm Victoria Lem from MEC. As an agency, we're extremely keen to work with our clients on sort of multi-platform partnerships with news brands such as yourselves. But what you can't tell us is, with our levels of investment, what we're actually getting in terms of audience delivery, unduplicated. So what are you doing to help standardise that within the industry? And secondly, as the Mail, are your editorial team becoming more commercially minded?
Well, I think our editorial teams are becoming more editorially minded, particularly in Mail Online. And I think that's going to be a trend that continues. But I think it is a slow trend, because we have, it's not journalists don't go into journalism for the pay, and they don't go into journalism to, sell advertising either. They go into journalism to tell a story, and, most of them are very professional about that. So, but they understand that there is a need to diversify our revenue stream. So that's, again, a part of an iterative process. As in terms of, combining our metrics to help you understand, that's an ongoing, challenge. It's easier said than done, obviously. But we're very happy to be as transparent as we possibly can, and Marcus is leading a client-facing team to do just that, and we're putting a lot of effort into that. So, it's an ongoing task.
Well, thank you very much. You've touched on, and I think very honestly, all sorts of plans that you've got, and referred to all of the different changes that are taking place. Clearly, it's going through a huge transition. The final question from me is, given all of this, is there anything that keeps you awake at night? What is the thing that you worry about the most?
Guys, it is expenses.
I can understand that, yes. Well, thank you very much for being with us today. I found it absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure everyone else here has too. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.